Hello, today we're looking at this. This is the Mountain Pass camp knife. I got this because I wanted to get a new knife. There wasn't too many videos on it, and
filling the void left by a hardwired skill set, growing continually more useless the further we get from throwing rocks, approaching the tipping point where you will all be locked in pods and harvested for your genetic materials. No, please, don't adapt. Just buy another knife.
Alright, so my first impressions, what seems unique about this knife, or less common I guess about this knife, is that it does have a much longer handle than you usually see. So compared to like this is the SE4, definitely not a small handle, it's just like a palm filling handle. This guy has some extra end that sort of hangs over the edge, making a good knife for like a fairly large bloke or a large hand at the very least. So it's comfortable in my hand. If you have a small hand, you might find yourself with a bit too much room in this front finger groove, but for me it fits quite nicely. My first impressions of the knife's general build and construction are really positive. I like the red liners, everything's well finished and well done. The edge could have been sharper, so I didn't love that the edge was like, it was fine. It would have cut cardboard or whatever, of course, but really I prefer like a nice sort of paper slicing edge out of the box, but you don't get that from everyone. I'm maybe a bit spoiled for choice. What else have we got? The sheath it's good to get a leather sheath. This is definitely a lower price point. So say you're looking at your 7-inch 1095 knives, you're looking at things like the Ka-Bar USMC, you're looking at the SE6 perhaps, and this guy here is about $100 less than an SE6 quite comfortably, and about sort of $30 or $40 less than a Ka-Bar is these days over here. So you're going to see some reductions in something. It's made in El Salvador, so the other two are made in America, so that's a bit of your money gone. And also this leather sheath, whilst feeling about on par with the leather Ka-Bar sheaths that come, and with sheaths like this Ontario Pilot Survival Knife, it's kind of that thin kind of hard leather, like kind of, it's less alive feeling leather, if you get what I'm saying. A little bit rougher on the edges, all that sort of stuff. A bit kind of tinnier feeling. Comparison perhaps to this is my Alex Zedron sheath. He would have had this made by probably a boutique leather crafter or something like that. Nice burnished brown edges, bit of squeeze to it still, bit of substance to it still, whereas this kind of feels a bit husky feeling, so like as in dead, not as in husk knives, as in like a husk, like a a little bit less alive, so to speak. Another thing was the leather strap is really hard to, like the snap is almost too hard to even bother clipping in. it's not like a good pull or dot one or anything like that. And to be honest, the leather strap that it rides on is definitely, it's a different kind of leather, more of like a stretchy, elasticy leather than the rest of the sheath. I think I'm just going to end up cutting this off and going without it. There's plenty of friction at play here, keeping the knife in the sheath. So I think I'll just go like that. Look, my initial impressions are about spot on with what I would hope from a $150-ish large camp knife. And it truly is like a large camp knife rather than a, survival type knife, I guess. It does feel a bit more of an elegant tool, a bit more like it's for like an old-fashioned butcher knife stand-in or something like that, doing work akin to that, whilst also still having like a good grip and a good amount of steel to do your harder working tasks. That's my first impression anyway. So that sort of illustrates, this is the same grind on the edge. This is actually a mirror polished edge, but a 20 degree per side edge on this one as well, as was the Condor. And just owing to that extra bit of stock thickness, it makes it far less good at slicing through resistive materials like this vinyl tubing here than the Condor is. The Condor makes the cut much easier. Like, it gets started and it continues through a whole lot better, just owing to that thinness and those slightly better geometries. At least better for slicing. Probably, obviously not as, overbuilt for betoning or splitting that the 4 perhaps is here. Comparison, again, this is a really well ground sort of belt knife from Alex Dron, S45 VN steel with his edge on it there, and that's probably, it feels about as good as the Condor there, probably even slightly thicker in the stock department. Yeah, so when you grind really well for slicing, you can emulate thinner knife performance, even if your stock is a bit on the thicker side. One thing I will say about these blade coatings, just give them a good old scrub before you start using the knife too much. I always just notice a bit of black comes off, and whilst I'm sure it's in small amounts, and I'm sure we inhale more of this stuff in a major city every day, I just prefer to directly ingest less of it if I could help it. So just give it a good old scrub and eventually it stops coming off entirely. But if you take the knife out of the box and cut into like an onion, then that onion will wear off some of that grey and you'll see it on the sides of the onion. So just something to think about. It's a finish that does generally deter rust a bit. It's probably some kind of paint or something. But overall, still probably not something you want to be, licking. So there you go. So overall, I am quite happy with this blade. It is imperfect, but I think suitably so, given that it's, about $100 less than a lot of the other 7-inch long, 1095 multi-purpose sort of camp/survival knives perhaps. That being said, I think this is definitely backing away more from the survival aspect into more like the camp and home. This would make just a really good knife to have in your kitchen knife drawer for all your family members who go to get the kitchen knives every time they need to open a box or open some like plastic packaging or something like that. Like they're using a chef's knife for that. A lot of families do this, mine included sometimes. So I think having a knife like this around for that sort of thing does a really good job. That being said, to keep this one sharp is going to be more important than others for its enduring performance. This is it's a lower grind, and whilst it's a thin blade stock, and whilst when very sharp, it does cut through the vinyl tubing really, really well. That does rely a bit more on the actual edge being sharp than the geometries behind it, because the geometries behind it they're cruder, they're thicker. You can see, they've just in their factory they're making probably these against many, many other knives as well. They just go grind, and then done. Whereas, someone like, obviously this is an amazingly made knife by someone who makes, one knife every week or something, it's different. So you're gonna have to keep the edge a little bit sharper. Fortunately though, it's 1095, so that's gonna happen without too much fuss. I will go from my initial sharpening to just touching it up. On this guy, and in fact, I have done that already. I did put a bit of a roll in it. I must have hit a rock or something when I was battening before for the purpose of review. And that being said, it does really do those jobs fine. It's not a survival knife. It's not quite on par with the SE6, for example, as being like an ultra rugged and ready. You wouldn't want to stick this into anything and lean on it too hard, whereas the SE6 you probably could make such a maneuver. So overall, great camp knife, great all-purpose knife, great house knife.
Great poop knife.
Don't tell them about the poop knife.